Hey everyone, welcome to my Unreal Engine 4.26 beginners tutorial using this Unreal Engine Hour of Code project. It just came out. So you're going to want to go to the marketplace here and you can either search Hour of Code or you can go to the Epic Games content here under free and it pops up right here. So it just came out and I think this is a pretty cool project for learning Unreal Engine. So if you're brand new, this is your first time ever using Unreal Engine, then go ahead and create this project. And I'm using 4.26, but it will also work on 4.25. And this project is really designed for like teachers to be teaching students almost in a classroom setting. They have lesson plans and everything, and there's 5 lessons total. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna go through each lesson and do them on the video, and you can kind of do them with me, and you're gonna learn the basics of Unreal Engine and hopefully have a decent understanding of how to make games with it. So once you create the project, it's going to end up in your library up here and it will be under your My Projects. So here's what it looks like for me. So you're just going to want to double click this and open it up. So here's what the project looks like when you first launch it. You can come up to the top here, hit the play button, and now you're able to play and run around. You can hold down the shift key and sprint. But yeah, this is just a very basic third-person character they have for you. And you can try to cross this gap, but now you cannot. And that's actually lesson number 1. So the first thing to learn, the first lesson is just about collision, how collision works, why we use collision in video games, and how to do it in Unreal Engine 4. So this is actually the PDF for the first lesson that you can download if you want, but this is really for the teachers, right? And it kind of just goes over collision and things like that, overlaps, why we use them. But here's the activity that we're supposed to do in the first lesson. We basically want to get the player across this gap and then get the player over here. See, activity 1, this is like the end point of the first lesson. So first, how are we going to get the player from the starting location here over to here? So that's the first lesson. And so this lesson is really meant to get the beginner, the first time user, comfortable with the engine here. So you can grab these meshes in the level, you can move them with this gizmo here, and then if you press the E key, that lets you rotate. You press the R key, that lets you scale, and then Control Z to undo, and then the W key to move back. So W, E, R. These are good shortcuts to get used to. And then up here you have snapping. So as you can see, when I move this, it kind of snaps. If I bump this up to like 500, it's going to really snap around. So these things are pretty important for, building out your levels, but you can always turn off the snapping with that button there and then just move it as you wish. And then same with rotating. If you press E, it's rotating snapped, but there will be times when you want to click this and disable snapping and have smooth rotation. And then scaling as well. You can always unsnap the scaling here and then scale as you would want to. So let's say you want to place another box in the level, or actually in our case, we got to make these platforms that the player can cross, right? But the issue right now is the player, if he even steps on it, he falls through it. So it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And that's really the first lesson about collision. And actually, I'm going to move this out a little bit because I don't want it in the wall here. So I'm just going to move it. So how do we get more of these? So there's several ways you can do this. I'm going to show you the long way, and then I'll show you the instant way, basically. So over here in the world outliner, anything you click on here is called an actor. You can see it says 855 actors. Everything in your level is considered an actor. This light, this player's starting location. This is where the player starts. So you can put this wherever you want the player to start the game. So I'm gonna have him start back here now by this window and he'll be facing this. Or maybe you want the player to start down here. And if I press the N key, drops it to the ground, and then let's rotate this 90 degrees because wherever this blue arrow is facing is the direction the player will face when he starts, as you can see here. So let's just have the player start down here. That's fine with me. So how to place more of these platforms? And we need the player to get across this gap here and to end up on this platform. So how do we do that? Well, if you click on the platform, you can see it selects it here in the outliner. And then down here in details, it actually shows us which mesh we're using. And if you click this magnifying glass, it'll actually take you right to the mesh in the content browser here. So this content browser is where all of your stuff is stored, all of your meshes and templates and assets, things like that. Anything you add from the marketplace, it's going to show up here in a new folder. And you can just kind of go through here and see what you have, all these different blueprints, different meshes, textures, widgets, etc. And what's really cool is, let's say you're looking for a specific mesh. You can just come to the base of the content folder and then type in the name up here. So for example, this is a platform, right? So I can come up here and just type in platform, and then it shows us different assets for platforms. And we got like these 4 different platforms. And a pretty cool tip is, let's say you wanted to replace this. Like, let's say we wanted to use this platform instead of the one we have, like this one looks more gold, I guess. I could just come in here and hit this arrow and it will replace it. I didn't really notice a difference there though. Maybe these platforms are exactly the same, but let me give you another example. Let's say we want to put a box here, right? I can select that box and then hit this arrow. Whoa, it just added a massive box, right? So that's something you could do if you want, but generally speaking, you're going to want to just grab it and then drag it into the world like that. Okay, and then you have a new box in your level. Now that's what I would do if you're trying to add a different mesh, like a new one. But once you already have the mesh in your level, like I have this box, right? It would be really inconvenient to have to click this magnifying glass and keep dropping them into the world. So instead, what you can do is, with the mesh selected, or any object, even a light, you can hold down the Alt key and then drag, and then it just makes a duplicate. So that's really how you move around actors and get them in your level. Once you've added the actor into your level, you never have to go back into the content browser and re-add it. You can just select like this roof, hold down Alt, and then drag it, rotate, and then you can see how I could start making like a new roof here if I wanted to do something like that. And then I could just keep going, right? Something like that. I'll just leave these here. I'm not going to build out this roof. I'm just kind of showing you how to drag and place actors. So these rocks here, maybe I want to add another rock over here. Hold down the Alt key. Let's scale this one down, make it smaller. And yeah, there you go. You get the idea. But anyway, let's get back to lesson 1. So lesson 1 is getting the player across this gap. But as you already saw, when the player jumps onto the platform, he just falls through it. Oh, no, he didn't. So I'm going to set this platform back to the original one. It's not the _A, it's just this one. And that's part of the lesson. If you keep it as A, it's going to have collision working. The lesson for this platform is that the original one here doesn't have collision, so you just fall through it. So the lesson is to teach collision here. So if you have a mesh in your level that the player is just moving through, it's not blocking the player, anything like that, then that usually indicates that the mesh doesn't have collision set up. So what you want to do, in our case here, we're going to select the platform, double click this static mesh. It's going to open up the mesh editor, and I'm just going to grab the tab here. And then now I can click this collision drop down and check simple collision. And it doesn't show anything, which means there's no collision. So we have to make collision. So I can come up to the collision tab and then do 18 maybe, something like that. Yeah, you can do that if you want. It's just a very simple collision for the platform. And then what we can do down here is scroll down, and then here's collision settings. We can set the collision here to block all, which means it'll just block the player. Or you could do overlap all, which is overlapping. And overlapping is good for doing events and stuff. Like if the player overlaps a certain object, let's like fire an event, right? Let's like print something on the screen, damage the player, whatever, things like that, open doors. That's what you use overlapping for, and we'll get into that later. But block all means it's just going to block everything, whether it's the player, bullets, projectiles, spells, things like that, right? But you can see there's different settings here. Maybe you only want the collision to overlap only pawns, so it'll only overlap like the player and stuff like that. So lots of different settings here, but let's just keep it as block all. Save it. And now when I play, I can stand on the platform. Okay, so obviously we need more platforms. So now you get to use your new Alt key shortcut and just make a bunch of platforms here and make a gap so that the player has to actually like jump. I'm gonna hold down Alt again, drag it out, and then one more time. So this now brings us to our second task in this first lesson. So the player's jumping, and then the player makes it here, right? But let's say the player jumps and then misses and falls down here. Now he's stuck here forever. So in the editor, you can just press the escape key and stop playing. But like, let's say you packaged up this game, you shipped it out, and then people started falling in this gap, and then they just don't know what to do. They have to like Alt F4 to close the game. So we need to set up a collision box down here that restarts the game, right? Sends the player back to the beginning. And in that case, we want to use one of those overlap collision volumes because we don't want to block the player. We just want the player to overlap with the box and then reset the game. So in that case, if you come up to place actors up here, you have all these different things you can place, right? You can just drag these things into the level. You can drag the player start here. You can drag lights, for example. Let's say we put a light down here. Let's maybe make the color red, you know, like, oh no, warning, don't fall down here. I don't know, whatever. I'm just kind of showing you guys stuff. I can hold down the Alt key and just start dragging it around as well. Like that. We want a volume down here, a collision volume that's going to reset the game. So in that case, you can type up pain. You get this pain causing volume. So let's drag this into the level. And it just looks like a cube like this. So what we want to do is actually scale it up so it's about the size of this gap. So I'm going to press the R key and just start scaling it. And then press R again. I'm going to come out here and press R and start scaling it again. It's kind of hard to scale it in this thing actually. But let's just scale it and then bring it down. So it's the size of it, but I'm going to bring it down so that it's about halfway down or at the bottom or something. So it's kind of like lava, right? The player touches it, player dies, and so we want to reset their location. But I got to make sure it's covering the whole thing. I don't want it off not covering that edge completely. So there we go. Let's bring it in a little bit more. Okay, so it's covering everything. And so now when we play, the player's jumping, and if the player falls in, oh no, he restarts. Yay. So that's just a quick lesson there on overlapping. You can do a lot more with collision and overlapping and stuff like that, but we'll get into it later. So now to finish up the first lesson or the first activity, once the player reaches this location, the player's got to get to here. And so now for you as the developer, you just got to kind of figure out how you want the player to get there. So in our case, what we can do is just grab these platforms and just hold down Alt. And then just start moving them into position here. And the player can just start to jump across, right? So that's all you have to do. Just start placing these floating islands around and place enough so the player can get to the destination. I'm just gonna do that really quickly. Do something like that, and then like that. Jump across the gap here. Wow, such a good gamer. Oh no. And then yeah, you can hold down the shift key and sprint. And boom, we made it. Activity 1 complete. But what if the player falls off here, right? You jump off and you're gonna fall forever. You'll just never stop falling. And here's another cool lesson. So I hit escape key and now the camera is stuck down here. So let's say I had nothing selected. I can't see any of the world up there. I'm just way down here. I don't know what's going on. What I can do is in the world outliner, I can type in player start, right? Here's the player start. I'm going to select it. And then in the world here, in the viewport, I'm going to press F. And it's going to take me to the player start. So any actor you select, when you press the F key, it'll take you to it. Well, that's like a weird fog plane, I think. No, I don't know what that is. Anyway, I can select the cloud, press F. So yeah, you get the idea there. So how do we fix that issue though if the player falls off? So in the world settings here, we have this kill Z. And to make this work, you have to click this arrow, show advanced, and then enable this. And so when the player reaches this negative whatever location, that's where it will reset the player. So what I'm going to do actually is, let's just grab this guy and I'm going to move him down to a location where we want to reset. Actually, this is a good location to reset. So that location is negative 3,800. So I'm just going to do minus 4,000. And now I'm just going to go test. Okay, I suck in my own game. So I'm just going to jump off and see if that works. So fall to about minus 4,000. There you go. So now let's move on to lesson number 2. So lesson number 2 is about moving platforms and checkpoints. And so what we're going to do is, here's the activity 1 destination. So if you come to the content browser here, in the Hour of Code folder, go to blueprints, and they have this checkpoint blueprint that they've created. So just take this and drag it in here. And this is kind of like a little checkpoint spot. So once the player crosses the platforms, gets to the other side, and this is like what the player is looking for. We can make it bigger, right? We could like scale it up. It's up to you. But this is what's called a blueprint. And so if we double click this and open it, this is where you're going to do your programming. So on the left, you have these components that you can add. And this blueprint has a cylinder mesh, a button ring mesh. So I can like move that. It's separate. It's got a collision sphere, a checkpoint transform, checkpoint text, and then an arrow. So anytime you make a change to a blueprint, like let's say I move it up here, I would click this compile button to save it. And then in the event graph here, this is where you actually do your programming. So this is the code that they've set up for the checkpoint. So you just go left to right here. This overlap, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. So when you have collision components, if you scroll down here on the details, you have all these different events that you can do when the collision is hit by a player. So the most common one is this begin overlap. You can see they've already added it. I can click view and it'll take me to it. Basically, this event fires whenever an actor overlaps the collision. But that's also has to be based on the collision settings, right? So the collision here is preset to overlap all dynamic. This was set to overlap only pawn, for example. This would only fire if a pawn, which is the player's character, overlapped it. Now, if you don't want to use a preset, you can always go up here and click custom. And now you can actually customize the collision here. Like let's say we want it to ignore everything except for just pawn, which means the player. This is actually really common. I do this all the time. Like I want it to ignore everyone, only overlap with the player, ignore like bullets, ignore, rockets, fire, things like that, right? So I'll just keep it like this because the player is the only thing in the level. So I'll just keep that. And then the collision enabled, you can either set it to have no collision or query only, which means, just like overlapping. But then you can also do physics and collision enable and things like that. So in this world here, there's this ball. The player can actually kick this ball around. So if I drag this out, make a duplicate here, let's put it right there. When I play, the player can actually kick the ball around. Kind of cool. And the reason for that is if I click the details here, number 1, the ball has physics enabled. And then number 2, the preset here is physics actor. And then its object type is a physics body. So it's able to be pushed around. You can see how it's supposed to block everything. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how the collision works for certain objects. Now this box here, this isn't a physics actor. It doesn't have physics enabled. It's just designed to block the player, not get like pushed around or anything like that. But let's say, let me bring this box out here. I'm going to scale it down. Now if I put it up here and I go to simulate, it's just going to float. See how it floats? So simulating is pretty cool just to see how, the world responds when it starts. So if I hit simulate again, this ball falls because it has physics enabled, whereas this box is floating. So if I turn on physics here and then simulate, it should fall. Yeah, you can see how it falls. And then if I make this box a physics actor, which it now is, I'm going to play. The box falls, and now I can kick the box around. Whee! Okay, but let's update our game a bit. So we're on lesson 2. Okay, so let's go back here to the blueprint. So the player hits the checkpoint. It's basically this red sphere that you see here. This is that overlap. So when the player hits this red collision sphere, it's going to fire this event. Okay, it's not actually the mesh here that's firing. The mesh is just for like appearances. It's actually this invisible red sphere circle that fires this event and runs the logic. So what happens is the player hits the sphere, this variable called checkpoint enabled, it gets set to true. The checkpoint gets activated, and then this means it's going to change the color of the checkpoint to this blue right here. So you can like change this to whatever you want. And this dynamic material reference, it's like, where did that come from? Basically what happened is they created a variable for it. This is kind of advanced, but if you come up to the construction script, this gets ran like whenever the object is in the world. And all they're doing basically is creating a variable off of the material that is being used in either the cylinder or the button here. I'm not sure which one. And then they're able to make it into a variable, as you can see right here. And then they're able to update the color because of that. So kind of advanced, but yeah. Anyway, after it runs this, it's now going to set the spawn location to this new checkpoint. That's what's going on here. It's casting to the game mode and then setting the new spawn location. And then all this does is play a sound. Just play sound 2D. You just right click, play sound 2D. Or maybe you want to play sound at location. Then you could do that. But then it's going to ask you for a location. So how would you spawn a sound at the location? In that case, let's say we wanted to spawn the sound right here on this object. All you would do is you'd right click and type in, well, I would just start with location if you're new, right? You type in location and you're like, okay, what am I looking for here? There's a lot of stuff, but what you would actually be looking for is this one called get actor location. This will just get the location of this specific actor in the world. So if you click details and come up, it has this location. That's all it's getting. It's just going to grab that location and then we plug it in here. Because if we keep this blank, then it will actually spawn a sound at 0, 0, 0. So let's say I grab this rock here. I'm just going to duplicate it. I'm going to set its location to 0, 0, 0. So that's right there. This is 0, 0, 0. So if I keep this location blank, when the player steps on this checkpoint, it will literally spawn a sound right here at 0, 0, 0. It'll play a sound right here. So we don't want that. What we do want is to play a sound at the actual location of this blueprint, wherever it is in the level. So instead of playing a 2D sound, I'm going to hold down Control and drag this pin here. So now we're playing a sound at this new location, but it needs a sound file. So a cool shortcut is I can click this magnifying glass right here. Takes us to this sound effect. I can pick any other one if I want, but let's just select that and then come back here. Click the arrow. Boom. Now we're going to spawn this sound at location instead of playing a 2D sound. So just a cool little intro to Blueprint. You can also click this drop down button, gives you more options here. But yeah, so anyway, now when I play, the player's going to have to cross all the stuff he created here. And then as the player approaches the checkpoint, he hits it, plays the sound at location, and updates the color to blue. Now when I play, you notice that I start back here again. We don't want that. You might be thinking like, hey, I thought we were adjusting the new spawn point. I thought we were updating it. So this is another lesson here. We're setting the new spawn location to the transform of the checkpoint. That's what's going on here. And the transform, if you're curious, that's basically the location, the rotation, and the scale just all combined into one variable. So an example here is if I duplicate that, I can duplicate anything in Blueprint with Control W. Very handy shortcut. And if I right click this pin, I can click split. And so now we have the location, rotation, and scale. So you'll find yourself splitting transforms at times and then just working with one thing at a time. I could actually take this and plug it in there if I wanted to, right? Because they're both yellow, which means they're both vectors, and they're both the locations of the actor. But anyway, we're supposed to be updating the spawn location of the third-person game mode. So how do we find the game mode here? Well, if you come into the level and then click World Settings, here's the game mode override, third-person game mode. So this is the rules and stuff like that for each level. Every level you make, you're usually going to plug in a game mode here. By default, it will say none. So then you'll get your game mode and you'll plug it in. So let's click the magnifying glass and browse to it, and then let's open it. So let's come here, and then on the left we have this variable spawn location. Now let's say you have a lot of code here and you don't know where this variable is being used. You can right click and do find references, and then it's going to show you all the locations. So I can like double click this, takes me here, and then set spawn location here. So if you're seeing all this and this is like a foreign language to you, I'll explain what's going on here as simple as I can. So there is this function called get game mode. You can right click and type in get game mode and it'll pop up. And then what we're doing with the game mode here is we're casting to the third person game mode. So we're basically getting a reference to the game mode in the world here. Remember, it's called the third person game mode. So what we're essentially saying here is when the player hits the checkpoint, the player hits this red sphere here, this invisible sphere, the player hits it in the world, this event is going to fire. And then when it gets to this point in the code, the checkpoint itself is saying, hey, I want to talk to the game mode and I want to do something with it. And in this particular instance, what I want to do is in the game mode, there's a variable called spawn location. It's right here. It's got this orange color, which means it's a transform. You can see up here, it says variable type transform. So what the checkpoint is saying is that when the player hits it, I want to talk to the game mode and I want to tell it to update this new spawn location. So throughout your world, you might have a checkpoint here, and then you'll have checkpoints like all over the place, maybe here, maybe you'd have one here. Each time the player hits a new checkpoint, let's tell the game mode to update the new spawn location. And the spawn location is used when the player dies. So this is like the respawning functionality here. So the player jumps off an island, falls down, and then the game respawns the player. That's what this spawn actor right here is. So this spawn actor, it can spawn any actors you want, any blueprint actors. So if I click this browse, it's just going to spawn the player character again. It's going to respawn him. And it's going to spawn him at this transform. So it's asking for a location basically. And what we're doing is we're taking this new location, we're sending that to the game mode, and we're going to spawn the player in that new location. So in this particular instance, if the player falls off here, he's going to respawn right here on top of this checkpoint. So that's what these two things are here. So to actually get this variable here, this variable is the spawn location here in the game mode. So to actually access that, you would drag off of here. Now I would just type in spawn location. And then you have get spawn location, set spawn location. What we did here is we're setting it because we want to set it to a new value. So that's all we did here. And then this new value here, that's this stuff here, this checkpoint transform. This variable is this guy up here in the left. It's called this checkpoint transform, this paper sprite component. So in the viewport, can't really see it. There's really nothing here. It's this guy here. It's just, there's nothing set for it. So there's just nothing to see. It's basically an invisible object, but this is the component we're using to spawn the player at. And so what's going on here is that you can take these components here and drag them into the blueprint editor like that. And then you can do stuff with them. So in this particular case, we're just getting the transform. So you remember we got the actor location of this whole entire blueprint. That's what this is. But in this particular case, we are getting the transform of just this component. So right here, get world transform. We're grabbing the transform of this component here in the world. So you can see, I can actually select these things here. And if I wanted to, I can move them. See, I could actually put that there if I wanted to, but I don't want to do that. So this code here is getting the world transform of this checkpoint transform right here. So whatever this transform is, we are taking that and we're now sending it into the game mode and setting the spawn location right here. So we're updating this variable. That is what's going on in this whole section right here, this part. Okay, so kind of confusing, but tried to explain that as best as possible just to help you kind of understand what's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play I'm gonna go hit the checkpoint over here. I failed because I suck. Anyway, let's just not suck this time. So I'm gonna hit the checkpoint. And now I'm gonna kill myself. And I think I should spawn here at the blue. Yeah, see, so I spawn at the blue. And I'm huge. What the heck is going on? Why am I so massive? So what happened in the size here, this is actually a cool lesson, is remember how I said the transform has all three of these things here? So you can see it says transform has location, rotation, and scale. So what actually happened here is when the player hits this checkpoint, we set that as the transform. We take the transform of the checkpoint and we set that to be the spawn location. But this is actually, I don't think this is the right way to do it, because what happened here is I scaled this up to 1.8. And so what happened is we're actually setting that as the transform of the player. So you can see here, spawn actor, epic character. That's like our character here. You can open this up and just look at the guy. That's who we play. Very simple code here. Just movement and mouse. And whenever you make a project, epic comes with like a default character and it'll have most of this stuff here. It won't have death or sprint or anything like that, but we can get to that later. Point being is that the player gets respawned with this transform here. So it's actually respawning with a scale of 1.8. So if I bring this into the level, the player starts, he has a scale of 1.0, right? Just default, that's fine. But he's respawning with a scale of 1.8. So it only scaled on the X. I'm going to click this yellow arrow, resets it, and then I'm going to click the lock mechanism here. That makes it so anything I enter here gets applied to all three. So I'll do 1.8. So this is how he respawned. He respawned like this, right? That's what it respawned as, with a scale of 1.8, because that's what this scale is, 1.8. So I could set this back to 1.0 and then the player will now respawn with a scale of 1.0. But what if you want this to be big, right? You want this to be big, but you don't want the player to spawn with that scale. So what you would do then is in the third person game mode here, these are transforms. So I can hold down Alt and click, separate them, and then I can right click, I can split it, and then right click this and split it. So maybe we only care about the location and the rotation, but we don't want to plug in the scale because the scale is now 2. We want to keep it as a 1.0. Okay, so I'm going to compile and save, and this is in the game mode. And now I'm going to play and try not to die on my own level, which is embarrassing. So I get here, I hit the checkpoint. Now I'm going to kill myself, and I'll spawn with a scale of 1. So just normal size. There we go. Okay, cool. So now we have this moving platform thing going on. So what I'm going to do now, because I don't want to keep playing level 1 or activity 1 or whatever. So I'm just going to delete our player start. And then now right here, in place actors, I'm just going to type in player and we get player start, and I'm just going to drag it right here. So now when we play, we're just going to start here now. But now this next activity is about moving platforms. So I can jump on this, get to the other side. And then now we got to somehow get up to that island over there. But we want to make our own moving platforms. So it gives you a little hint here with this level sequence. So we're going to be using the sequence editor. But this is the sequence for our moving platform right here. So they've already set this up for us, and then we're going to make our own. So you can see with the sequence here, it's set to autoplay and then loop indefinitely. So let's say we set this play rate to 5. And now we play, and now this thing is just moving really fast. Look at that. Oh, get me on there. Aha, I'm good. Oh, I'm bad. But yeah, so let's set this back to 1. That just gives you a little idea there. And now we got to make another one, or our own, to get over here. Actually, let's just double click this platform level, this level sequence. You can double click it. And down in the bottom here, at least for me, it opened up this sequencer. And they actually have several things here that are moving. This SM floating island 1. I don't even know where that is, but apparently it's moving somewhere in our level. Oh, we can actually click it and it shows up in the level, but actually I don't know, it's not here apparently. Let me do a simulate. So I'm simulating, and you can see that these three things are red, meaning that they're actually not working in the sequence here. Only this one's working. It's white, which means it's in the level. So these three things here, they were added at some point and then removed. So what we can do is we can just stop playing here. And I'm actually going to delete these three tracks. We're going to make our own. So just right click, delete. We'll just keep this one here. And then now we have this here called S moving platforms, but there's no sequence in here either. So I'm actually going to delete this as well. And now what we can do is make our own sequence. So I'm going to browse here. Let's right click. Let's go to animation and then level sequence. S underscore moving islands, I guess. I'm going to take this and drag it into the world. Just going to put it here because this is where it's going to be close to. I'm going to double click it now. And so now it's empty. And so we want to make some islands that move like back and forth that the player has to jump on to get across. So I'm just going to grab, let's see, it's just going to grab this island and just duplicate it. And then let's make it smaller. Let's do like, I guess 3. And I'm going to reset the scaling actually. There we go. Okay. So here's an island. Starts off here. Wait, no, let's get it close to the platforms. Get it lined up correctly. There we go. Like this height is good. And let's just make it go like left to right, you know, so it's kind of hard for the player to get onto. So I'm going to set the location here. It'll start here. And then in our level sequence here, hit track, add actor to sequence, and then up at the top, add floating island S57. Boom. Okay, so this is the location we want. I'm going to open up transform. We just care about location. I guess if you wanted to rotate it while moving, we could also update the rotation. But anyway, right here at 0, 0, I'm going to hit this plus sign. That adds the current location. And you know what? I will add the rotation because that's kind of cool. And so let's say after, you know, 30 frames or so, that's 30 frames per second. So after 1 second, let's put it in front of the player here. Let's rotate it. Gonna add location, rotation. Well, the rotation got changed. I don't know why. Rotate it again. There we go. I think it worked that time. Yeah, you can see it moving. And then at 60, maybe put it over here. Let's add the location. I'm going to rotate it again. Add rotation. Okay. So now with the sequencer selected, let's go to autoplay and loop indefinitely. Yay. Oh, we didn't finish the end. Okay. So now we want to come back up to 90. And I'm going to take this keyframe here. I'm going to copy it. And then at 90, I'm going to paste from transform location. And then for the rotation, I'm actually going to rotate it myself. And then at 120, we're back to the original. So just going to right click, copy. And then at 120, paste location. Let me see. So we rotate, rotate. My dog's barking. And then here I'm going to rotate it a little more. Okay, cool. So let's simulate. Goes over. Looks kind of silly, whatever. But you kind of get the idea here. Okay, so that's moving there. Now we want to do another one. We want to do like multiple platforms to get the player across. So I'm going to duplicate, holding down Alt. I'm going to scale this one up. Let's actually make this one stationary. So the player has to get on here, then he gets here, it's stationary. I'll do another stationary because I don't want to spend too much on the sequencer. And this thing's kind of higher, so I'm gonna rotate it a little bit just to get it up to the same level. Maybe go right here. And then now let's do one more sequencer, floating moving platform. Right here. So I'll have it start here. And this one got duplicated in here. I'm going to delete this. Let's add this guy. So go add a sequencer, floating island 60. Add the location rotation. I'll just say, actually, I'll ignore the rotation. And if you want to delete the keyframe, just select it and press the delete key. So at 30 seconds, let's put this like right here. Make sure the player can actually get on it like that. Add keyframe. And at 60, let's put it over here. At 90, put it back here. And then, whoops. I don't know why I added the scale rotation. But then at the end, we want to copy the original location. And then paste it. Okay, let's see. Wow, look at that. Okay, moving platforms, cool. And now we need to place another checkpoint here. So I'm just going to come up to the checkpoint. I'm going to hit this browse. Takes me right to it. And I can just drop it in. I'm going to bump up the scale on it as well. Now, if you notice with the platform, it gets to the end here and then it kind of pauses. And that's because in the sequencer, this red bar is actually the end. So it's ending at 150 with nothing going on. So if I drag this here to 120, that's now the end point. And then when I simulate, you're going to see it's going to hit the end and then just go right back, just like that. And same with this guy. So that guy kind of jitters there. And the reason for that is the rotation is off. You see the rotation looks like that here. So it looks different. So I want to actually take this and copy the rotation. And this one, I'll delete it. And then I will paste the transform rotation. So now here it's the same as here. So now it's gonna, so now when I simulate, you can see the rotation stays the same. And it's really a moving plow. Okay, whatever. That might actually end up being really difficult for the player, but let's go ahead and play. So I'm just gonna cross the first moving platform. And then now I gotta get on my spinning island of death here. Let me on. Okay, I suck. I'm gonna cheat and move my player start right here. Okay, let's try to get on my own platform. Oh my gosh, I made it. Okay, maybe rotating is a bad idea. Okay, how am I gonna do this? Go. Okay, no. So easy solution. I'm just gonna delete all the rotating. Screw that. So now it doesn't rotate and our life will be easy. Boom. Boom. Okay, come here. Come on. There we go. Oh, we made it. Checkpoint. Yay. Okay, so that's it for lesson 2 or activity 2. Let's move our player start over here now. So lesson number 3, reach new heights with power-ups and collectibles, working with public variables in Unreal Engine. And basically we want the player to be able to jump to this island here because currently the player cannot. So in our blueprints folder here, they have this jump boost. Let's open it up, take a look at it. But like before, we have a mesh, a collision sphere, and text. So all of these things can be added from up here. So static mesh you have right here. If I type in sphere, you have this sphere collision. So these are just things that they added to the blueprint and you can add them as well. And like before, we are once again using the begin overlap. So basically, I'm first going to take it and drag it into the level. Let's put it like right here. And let's just simulate and see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see that it spins around. That's cool. It's actually rotating, and what that is this rotating movement. This is a component as well, so I can actually just delete this and then it won't rotate anymore. So let's say you're making your own blueprint and you want it to rotate. You just go to add component, start typing rotate, and then you get rotating movement. And then this value on the Z, that's what's making it rotate. So if I simulate, so now if I simulate, it's going to start rotating again. But this Z value, it's rotating along the Z axis, this blue arrow, that's Z. So it's rotating around that. Now, if I put 180 on like the X axis here and then compile, it's going to have just a way different rotation, see? So I'll set this back to 0. And then 180 is also the rate, right? It's the speed. So if I set this to like 720, now it's going to rotate really quickly, as you can see. And this is really getting annoying, this warning that keeps popping up for me. It's going access none, trying to read property get player character in the third person game mode at the node assign on destroy. So you're going to be getting warnings a lot when you're coding. And beginners have a tough time reading these warnings. They don't understand what they mean. And so let's kind of walk through this warning here. So access none, whenever you see this in your errors, it means that whatever is being referenced is not being read. It's like saying it's invalid, it doesn't exist, etc. And then you can kind of read through here, this call func, you want to ignore that, but the part after it, get player character, this is the important part. And then it tells you which blueprint this error is happening in, and this is in our third person game mode, which we can click and it takes us to it. And then even further, you kind of want to ignore this, but then the node assign on destroyed, we can click this, and that's this event here. So basically what this error is saying is that this get player character, this value is not valid, doesn't exist. And I think it's because this whole event, when we play the game, like let's play, it's not going to give me an error this time, watch. No error. But when we simulate, it does give me an error. And the reason why is because when we simulate, there's no player character in the game. It's not spawning a player. So this event is getting ran, and even though we're only simulating, but this game mode still gets called. This begin play is still getting called, even though we're just simulating and saying that this player character doesn't exist, which is true. We're just simulating. We're not actually playing, so there is no character in the level. So in other words, this error doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. We don't really care about it because it's just that when we actually play, it works. So who cares? However, because it's annoying me, I'm going to show you how to fix this. So what we want to do is off of this pin, I'm going to drag off. I'm going to type in valid. We get this is valid node. I'm going to select it. And I'm also going to take this and plug it in here. And now I'm going to take this and plug it in here. So now what we're essentially saying here, this is a very handy dandy node here. This is valid. We're basically saying that only run this event, this function, or anything else after it, if this player character is valid, if it does exist. If it doesn't exist, do nothing. But we could also do other stuff off this, right? If you wanted to. So now when I simulate, it's going to get, the code's going to get to here. It's going to say, oh, the player character doesn't exist. Let's just do nothing. And no more errors. Okay, so that's just a good little lesson on debugging there and fixing just simple warnings. You know, off of this, you could also do something else like a print string, and we could say player character does not exist. I can make this text red. I can make it last for 5 seconds. And now when I simulate in the corner, you can see player character does not exist. It's going to stay there for 5 seconds. There it goes. So print strings are really handy, and learning how to debug is going to be probably your most important skill ever. But yeah, so I'll just leave this here. That fixes that warning that we were getting, or that error. So now back to the jump boost here. 720 is really quick. I'm going to put it back to 180. It's default. Now let's go to the event graph here and I'll tell you what's going on. So this other actor, it's just looking for an actor. So whenever anything overlaps this jump boost, this gets called. And if you do a print string here, kind of showing you debugging stuff again, if you take this other actor and plug it in, what's going to happen is when the player overlaps with the object here, specifically this red collision sphere, it will print out the name of that actor. In our case, it's going to print out the character. So if I play and then I walk over this thing, you can see it says epic character in the corner, and that's the name of our character, epic character. So I can delete that now and just reconnect this because we know it's working. We want to get information from the player character, the epic character, because we want to make the character jump higher. So by default, this is the player's jump. Once I hit this, we can now jump much higher, as you can see. And so the way we're changing that jump velocity, as you can see here, that it's set to 1500. The way they did this is they just made a variable down here and called it jump velocity. But realistically, you wouldn't even need to do that. However, the reason why they did do this is because, let's say you didn't use a variable here, you just wanted to manually set this to 1500. Then 1500 would be the value for every single boost you put in your level. But let's say you want this boost to be like 1500, then you make another one. This one you want to be 3000. That's why you make this variable here. So they made a variable of type float. You can just come down here, create a variable, right? So by default, it's red, which means boolean, but I can just click this, change it to float. And now it's green, and I can drag it and do get, and then now it'll work, right? But I'm going to show you a shortcut. Before I do that, let's go backwards a little bit. So we're casting to the character. This is our epic character right here, the player character. And it's like, okay, where do I adjust the jump? Where is it? So in the character, you have to click this character movement on the left. And then you have all these variables that you can play with, like the walk speed. This is the speed of the player. You have the gravity scale, lots of different things here. But here's the jump right here. 600 is the default jump velocity, or actually it's 420. They set it to 600, so I'll keep it there. And then we have air control. I guess they adjusted that as well. But yeah, you have all these different things you can play with to adjust the character movement. And so what's going on here in this blueprint is that we're casting to our character. Now, again, what casting means is you're trying to get information from another class. So in our case, what we're doing is we're trying to get information from our player character, from the epic character that the player is playing. This guy right here, we want to get his access to his jump information, which is here in the character movement. We want to be able to edit this value. So when it comes to an overlap here, it just says other actor, and all it's talking about is an actor object reference. And remember, anything in your level is an actor. So this is an actor, that's an actor. This blueprint is an actor. Your player in the level is an actor. Everything is an actor. So that's why it's asking for an actor reference here. It's just an actor object. And what that means is that everything derives from actor for the most part. So if I come up to the content browser and I go to create blueprint here, you can see at the top it starts with an actor, then it goes down to a pawn. And you can just read these things here. It says a pawn is an actor. And then below that is character, which is what the player is, right? The epic character. So it's a hierarchy. It goes actor to pawn to character. Or rather, it goes the other way around. It goes a character is a type of pawn, which is a type of actor. Okay, so it's like this hierarchy. And so because this epic character is an actor, we're able to drag off of this other actor. We can type cast. And because everything is an actor, like I was saying, look how many different classes we can cast to. It's just so many different classes that we can cast to here. In our case, we want to cast to the epic character because that's what the player is playing. So you drag off this and you do cast to epic, and then epic character will show up. Now, like I said, because everything is an actor, we could technically cast to all of these different blueprints here. What if we wanted to cast to the checkpoint? We could drag off this and do cast to BP underscore, and then there you go. There's checkpoint there, and then there's coin. So there's all sorts of things. You can cast to basically everything. And because everything is derived from an actor, that's why this is such a powerful node right here. So we're basically saying we know that the player overlapped the jump boost here. So now let's access information to the character that overlapped it. So now let's get information from the character and let's change it. But you can't just go other actor and then, set jump Z velocity. It doesn't work that way because we have to go, deeper. We have to get more specific. So we have to first cast to our, epic character or whatever name character that you have. Okay, so that's just a little primer on casting and actors and things like that. So as a beginner, it might be kind of confusing, but you'll get comfortable with it as you continue to develop. And personally, I don't do casting. I don't like to use casting. I like to use interfaces, but we're not going to touch on those in this tutorial. But if you take any of my courses, I'll show you why we use interfaces instead of casting and why I think they're just more powerful and better on performance. And then off of this pin here, we can get all of these different variables down here, as well as components up here. So for example, let's say I want to get the sprint speed. Watch this. I can do get sprint speed. I'm going to move this over. So now we got this sprint speed variable. The sprint speed is set to 1200. So let's say we want to set the player's movement speed to now be 1200, right? So remember, by default in here, character movement, the speed is 600 by default. But let's say I hit this jump boost, but I also want to increase the character speed. Off of this character movement, I can search for walk speed. So let's just drag off here and search walk speed. I can do set max walk speed. So now I can set it to a new value. Just going to plug this in like that. Let's say I want the speed to either be, if I plug that in, it's going to be set to whatever the sprint speed value is, which is 1200. So I could either do that. This will double the character's speed. So now when I play and I hit this, I'm now twice as fast. But anything you put here will make it fast, right? So let's say I want to make the character super fast. Put in 5,000 there. And now I'm like extra fast. Jump all the way over. Okay, goodbye. But yeah, you get the idea. So I can adjust the movement speed of the player here. I don't want to do that though. I'm just kind of showing you an example. You can hook this back up. So what we want to do is we want to cast to our player character, and then we can grab the character movement from the player and start adjusting things with it. And in our case here in this example, we're updating the player's jump to be 1500. All right, and then let's continue. So toggle visibility, SM power up. So basically what this means is the player overlaps with the object, and then we're taking the mesh here. So this mesh I can actually just drag here. And then there's all sorts of different things you can do off of it. But to give you a more general idea, if you click the mesh up here, these are the things that you'd be editing. So this toggle visibility, my guess is it's just turning it off, right? Toggle visibility, turn it off, make it invisible. It's currently visible. We hit it. It's now invisible. That's what this is doing. There is another way of doing this. Like I said, if you click the mesh here, you have this visible. Then you also have hidden in game. So by default, it's visible and it's not hidden. But let's say we want to make it hidden. I would just drag off. I'm going to type in hidden. We get this set hidden in game. Wow, this is cool, right? So we're just literally getting these functions and values off of the details over here. So I'm going to uncheck this. I'm just going to move it up. And then I'm going to plug in this one. And let's set new hidden to true. So now when the player overlaps with this object, down here we're setting this hidden in game to now be true, which is going to hide the mesh. So when I play and I hit it, it's now hidden. So that's what this does. So we make it hidden. And then the collision, this is sphere collision, so that's this here. So by default, we have the collision set to overlap all dynamic. Once the player collides with this object and we boost the player's jump velocity, actually what this is the query results. So that would be this here. So if I set this to custom, it's just updating this right here, this collision enabled. You can see it says set collision enabled, and then right here, collision enabled. You have these 4 choices, see? So that's how you edit collision in the game during runtime. So that's what this is doing here. And then again, we're playing sound at location. Oh, look, they use sound at location this time. So there it is. And then we're delaying. So what's the cooldown time here? 4 seconds. So after 4 seconds, this power up gets turned back on. So they toggle the visibility, which means it turns back on. And then they set the collision to be enabled again. So after 4 seconds, the player can hit this power up one more time. And then look, an is valid node. And all it's doing here is checking if the player is valid, if it exists. If it exists, then set the player's speed back to 600 after 4 seconds. See, so we delay for 4 seconds and the player's jump goes back to the default of 600. So before I test this, remember I replaced this visibility with this hidden in game. So I'm just going to delete this because we don't need it. We'll just go back to what they had. But I personally like to use this hidden in game. I think it's nice to use. You can make the whole actor hidden in game. If I just disconnect this, it will hide this whole entire actor. Everything here will be hidden. That's why I like to use it. I'd rather just hide everything. So as an example, let's actually do that. I'm going to move this out. Let's set the whole entire actor to be hidden in game. And then I'm going to press Control W. I'm going to disconnect these. And then after 4 seconds, I'm going to unhide the whole entire actor. It says target must have a connection. So that's kind of lame, but basically it says self here, but what we need to do is right click, type in get self, get a reference to self. Now we can, well, we can't plug that in. So I'm just going to drag off to set actor hidden in game. Okay. Going to delete that. We're going to use this one here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to control copy, delete, paste, and then now we'll set this one to true. Okay. So now when I play, I hit this, it disappears for 4 seconds, and then after 4 seconds, it's going to come back. I'm not going to be able to jump high anymore. Hit it again. Yay. So now you know a different way of hiding actors, but this is, I actually prefer doing it this way. And hopefully you're kind of learning some blueprinting here. Now back here again, I wanted to show you a shortcut to create variables. So instead of having to come down here and add variables every single time, let's say we didn't have this jump velocity variable, pretend it doesn't exist. So we get our character movement here, and then we want to adjust the jump Z velocity. And like I said, if you come into the character here, click character movement, these are all different things that we're adjusting. So this max walk speed, you can adjust all this stuff here. This min analog walk speed, I could type that and it would pop up this mass here. So if I drag off this and do like set mass, you see it's right here. I'm literally just setting these values here. I'm just calling them in Blueprint. So you can get access to all of these different values here using this character movement right here. But anyway, so let's say we want to adjust the jump z velocity. You can right click this and do promote to variable. And you could say something like new jump right here. So that's our new variable. I'm going to compile it. But if you click the actor here, you can see here in the details panel, it doesn't have our new variable, but it has the old ones. It has a jump velocity of 1500 and a cooldown time of 4.0, 4 seconds. The reason for that is because when you make a variable, if you want the variable to be editable in the world, you have to do what's called instance editable. So you check this, and then you compile it, and now you can edit it in the world. So now out here, we have new jump of 0 in a default category. And that's because if I click new jump, the category is default and has a value of 0. So this I is the same thing as clicking that instance editable. So let's say we want to use this variable. Let's say jump velocity, I'm going to delete it, like doesn't exist anymore. It's now gone. If I click this, you can see it doesn't exist anymore. So let's put this new jump. Let's go category jump. A default value of what, 1000? Let's just say that, compile. Now out here, you can see new jump 1000. So let's say that one's 1000. I'm gonna make another one here. Now this one I could set to like 2000, maybe a cooldown time of 8 or 6. I guess 6 is our max. So if I click cooldown time, the slider range is from 0 to 6 with the value range of 0 to 6. That's why I cannot set it more than 6. So with new jump, we could say a value of 1000 to 2000. 1000 to 2000. So now 2000 is now the max. So if I try to set this to 5000, it'll go back to 2000. So now when I play, I'm going to hit this second one. I now have a jump of 2000. I can jump super high. Oh no. But anyway, I'm going to delete this guy out of the world, and we'll just keep this guy. We'll put him back to 1500. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to add some of these coin pickups in the level. So the first one, we're just going to put, I guess we'll put like a couple on each island here. Hold down Alt, and the end location is up here. Activity 3 destination. So let's just keep adding some coins for the player to collect. Right here, right there. Maybe some more up here. And then for the player to jump up here, we need another jump boost. So we can either select this guy and copy him over, or in our case, I'll just drag this one in like that. And he might need more than 1000 here. So let's try 2000. And so I'm going to put one more coin up here. And then we need another checkpoint here. So I'm just going to go browse to a checkpoint and drop it on the platform. And then let's scale it up a bit. Or not. Let's get it like to fit in between the wood. All right, let's play our activity number 3. So let's get the jump boost. Get our coins. Another jump boost here. Oh no. Okay, well I landed on the checkpoint. That's cool. So we beat activity 3. We're so good. Okay, let's move our player start. Actually, I'll just delete it. I'll add another player start right here. So we've beaten activity 3. It's time to move on to activity number 4. But before we move on to activity 4, let's just quickly look at the coin blueprint. You can open it up here. So it wants us to wait until activity 5, but I'll just tell you all that's happening really quickly. So again, the overlap, right? Like I said, you're going to be using these overlaps all the time when you make games. So the player overlaps with the sphere here in the coin, and we're casting to the third person game mode. That's up here. And then it's getting the current coin count. So you can tell with it dragging off here, it says coin count and it's green. Up here it says it's an integer. This means that there is a variable in the third person game mode here called coin count, and it's going to store the player's collected coins. So we come here, let's just look for it. There it is. It's in player inventory. It's called coin count. Default is 0, starts at 0. So every time the player hits one of these coins in the world right here, we're taking the current coin count in the game mode and we're just dragging off, do a plus sign, integer plus integer. We're just adding 1. And then if you drag off of this and type in set coin count, we're taking the current coin count, which in the beginning is 0, we're adding 1 to it, and then we're setting that to the new amount. So we're updating the coin count variable in the game mode to that new value, whatever it is here, plus 1. So the character hits the first coin, we take 0 plus 1, we now set it to 1. When the player encounters another coin, this coin count's now going to be 1. We're going to add 1 to it. Now it's going to be 2. So we have like 1, 2, 3. We have a lot of coins, right? A shortcut here is I can come to the world outliner. I can select a coin here. Look at this. If I hold down shift and click to the bottom, it says 9 selected. So that means we have 9 total coins in our world. So if the player collects all the coins, this coin count value in the game mode will be 9. I'm actually going to move that over. I'm going to make this stuff be activity 5 because this is like the HUD and stuff like that, which we don't have yet. And actually, at this point, we're doing everything else. We are playing the sound. We are destroying the actor. So this destroy actor, this is another common node you'll use. This just gets rid of the actor, deletes it from the world. So specifically what's happening in our case here is the player overlaps with the coin. We add 1 to the coin count in the game mode. We play a sound, and then we destroy the actor. We remove the coin from the world forever. So this is going to be activity 5. I'm just going to move this out of the way. I'll put that in there because we're doing all of this right now. We do all this in activity 3. But now it's time for activity number 4. Activity 4, the key to unlocking the final area, working with conditional statements in Unreal Engine. So basically what's happening here, I'm going to show you. The player then proceeds back down here. Then the player jumps up here to this building. It comes to this locked door. He presses E and says key needed, and the door won't open. So we're supposed to add a key somewhere in the level. Maybe you want to add a bunch of more power-ups and jumps and things like that. And maybe you want to put the key way over here. I don't know. It's up to you where you want to put it. So there's going to be 2 blueprints. You need the key blueprint. And then we have this locked door blueprint. So I can right click and browse to it. We have this door locked. So we can open this up. And we got a lot of code here, as you can see. So let's just go through it one by one just to kind of help you understand what's going on here. So in the viewport here, the event graph says begin overlap with the box collision. So up here is the box collision, and that's this. So when the player overlaps with this box here, you can see in the world, it's right here. When the player overlaps with that box, this is just a quick check to see if the door is open. So this is a boolean. these are either true or false. So by default, we want door open to be false. And that's all we're doing here. So to do this is called a branch node. It's just checking true or false. It's a condition, right? And you're going to use these all the time in your programming for all sorts of things. Like a good example is if the player is attacking with a sword, you would set, currently attacking to true. And then what you want to do is you want to set a branch node and you want to say, like, let's say the player goes to click the left mouse button to attack. You want to check that the player is not currently attacking. Because if you don't do that check, every time the player presses the left click button, it's going to attack, which you don't want, right? Like, let's say the player is like mid animation and the player presses left click again to attack. It all of a sudden cancels the current attack and then starts over. You don't want that to happen, right? You want it to be smooth. So you only want the player to be able to attack when the player is currently not attacking. So that's really what these do. So we're just checking here that we don't continue unless the door is not open, meaning door open is false. Then we can continue. So now what we're checking here is if the player has collected the key, but we're casting to the third person game mode here. That means in the game mode, there's a variable called have key. So let's find it. So right here, have key. By default, it's false, obviously. And now we do another check. So you can just hold down the B key and click. You can just make these branch nodes easily. We just want to check if the player has that key. So we're going to have to make a blueprint that updates the game mode and says the player does have a key. Yes, he does, right? So we'll do that after this. I just want to go through this. So if the player does have a key, if it's true, we do what's called enable input for this actor. This is actually confusing. So this get player controller, we haven't even talked about the player controller yet. I don't even think we have one, like a custom one at least. We just have a default one. So we have a character, we have a camera shake, and we have a game mode. We don't have a player controller. Now, if we wanted to, we could right click and create a blueprint class, and we could create our own custom player controller. But we don't need to do that for this project. By default, player controllers have this enable input action here. So what's happening here is if we type in get player controller, get this, and all we want to do is enable this actor, this door, to be allowed input, meaning the player presses like the F key or the E key. And if so, this actor can now accept that E key and open. So like I said, it's kind of confusing, but that's exactly what's going on down with this code now. So we'll get there in a second, but here's the false statement now. So when the player comes up to the door, doesn't have a key, it's false. This locked door is going to pop up and say, what's it going to say? It's going to say key needed, I guess. Let's go see. So it says press E to open, the player gets close. It says key needed on the bottom. Do you see that? The bottom of the screen there, it says key needed. That's all that's happening here. It fires automatically because every time the player overlaps, this event gets fired. This is going to be false because we don't have a key. So it's just going to keep saying that key needed every single time. It's just drawing text to the screen. And this is how they do that. They do that with widgets. So I don't want to get too much into widgets, but we can browse here. We can open it and we can look at it. So all this is the UMG editor. This is where you make like, health, stats, stuff like that on the screen, information. But all this one is doing is just saying key needed, and it's just drawing this text on the screen when the player overlaps with it. Now, end overlap, this one we haven't seen yet. This basically means that if the player is currently in the box, let me go back here. So if the player is in this box here, the collision, once the player leaves the box, it's no longer overlapping. That's called end overlap right here. And then this event gets fired. So these you're going to use a lot as well. You can like run functionality whenever a player leaves a collision volume. Like maybe you want a door to close or something when the player leaves, or maybe play a sound. In this case, all they're doing is disabling input on the door. and then removing the widget, right? So we create this text widget on the screen. We actually promote it to a variable here. And that's so we can reference it later down here. So this is the same variable. And then this means we're removing it from the screen. So you can drag off this, just type in remove. Remove from parent, that means remove the widget from the screen. So that will remove the text off the screen. And then they drag off, they go set. They're setting it to nothing, right? That's nothing here. So that means the variable is now invalid. It's set to nothing. This isn't really the best way to do it, in my opinion. I would do it a different way, but it is what it is. But now let's go down here. So this stuff here only works when input is enabled. And that's because down here we have input action interact. So when the player presses the interact key, it's going to run all of this stuff here. So your question might be, what is the interact key? Well, let's go find out. So if you come up to the world here, you go to edit, project settings. On the left, there is input right here. These are your input actions. So we can expand all of these. And we have interact right here. That is this, interact. And you can use this anywhere. We can also use this in the character here. We could type in, come down here and type in interact, and it will pop up. There you go. So now here, let's expand this. And this says it's set to the E key with the keyboard. Ooh, there's this celebrate. What's that? Middle mouse button. Not really sure what that does, but you can see it in the player here. If you press the K key, it will kill the player. If we hook that up, it's unhooked right now, but we could hook that up and kill the player. And then right here, quit game. This is actually important to do when you package the game, because if you don't do this, there's no way to close it unless you Alt F4. So the escape key, quit game, I'll keep that. But anyway, down here, the player presses the interact key, which in our case is E. We cast to the game mode. And we just want to see if the player currently has a key. If the player does, if it's true, do once, meaning only do everything after this one time, never do it again. And then what we're doing next is now with have key, we're now going to set have key back to false. So the player has collected a key. It's been set to true, which we haven't done yet. We got to go set that up. We're going to create our own blueprint for that. And then once the player presses E on the door with the key, you now set it back to false. So it's as if you're removing the key from the inventory. This is how you would do that. And then we'll play a sound. And then we do a timeline to open the door. So this is kind of advanced timeline animation. But then this is actually incorrect. We don't want to set door open every frame. So basically the way a timeline works is I'm going to open this up. You double click. And the length is 5 seconds. So basically what's happening here is the door is going to rotate for 5 seconds. And every frame, it's updating its new location. So it's almost like a tick function, which means it's just running constantly. Like if you're getting 60 frames per second, then this timeline is running 60 times per second over the course of 5 seconds. So it goes across this little curve here, and it's updating the rotation throughout. So you get like the smooth rotation. That's all that's going on here. You can see we have the door here. So this SM door. If I click SM door, that would be this, whatever this mesh is here. So it's the blue stuff in here. It's not this thing here. This is just the wall. This door is the blue thing in here. So all it's doing is taking that blue thing and rotating it for 5 seconds to a new location, whatever that is. And so the problem I see, and all of this stuff is getting updated as well. So this stuff is all running 60 times per second as well. So we keep setting this to true over and over and over again. That's bad programming. So instead what we want to do is going to disconnect that. I'm going to set finished here. So when the door is finished opening, then we set it door open. So this only runs one time. Now this here, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. but it has to do with the HUD, which we haven't worked with yet. Yeah, these nodes make the key icons show up on screen. I don't know. We'll come back and we'll change it. It looks like it set the opacity to 0.3 means like almost invisible. So before it was plugged into here, which means right away, the opacity of the like key image, which we haven't seen yet, was getting set to 0.3, almost invisible. This was getting set 60 times per second. That's just bad. That's bad programming, bad on performance. You don't want to do that. But now if I do it from here, after we open the door, the key icon on the player's HUD, the screen, it won't get set to 0.3 until after it opens. So instead, what I'm going to do, this is another cool little function here. I'm going to do a sequence node. So that means it goes from top to bottom. So first, it's going to, whatever you plug into 0, it will do first, and then 1, it'll do second. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this first. So we're going to set the HUD to 0.3, the key icon, which we haven't seen yet. I'm going to go open this HUD reference just so you can visualize it. I think it's going to be this. So T key. So by default, it's invisible, but it looks like this. So by default, it's hidden, but this is what it looks like. So we're setting that to 0.3 right when the player opens the door. And then right after we do play from start and we do the door animation. So kind of some difficult concepts going on here. I can see that, but hopefully you're kind of understanding. The more you work in Blueprint, the more all of this will start to make sense. But yeah, we set the door to open and that's it. And if you come up here, remember, door open is now true. So this will never run again because we have nothing off true. You could do, unless you wanted to do something off here, maybe you want to kill the player, I don't know. But now this brings us to our next assignment, which is to actually make this key blueprint. We don't have a key blueprint. So we can't even open this door without a key. And keep in mind, all the key really is just this boolean being true or false. So if it's false, the player doesn't have a key. If it's true, the player has a key. That's all it is. It's not anything in depth. It's nothing crazy. That's really all inventory systems are, like at a basic level. It's just, does he have it? Yes. Does he not have it? No. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to make our own blueprint now. So I've taken you through several blueprint actors here. Let's now go make our own. I'm just going to do it up here in the content. I'm going to right click, blueprint. We just want to make an actor because an actor is just like a very basic object. So you click that. Let's just call it BP_myKey. And if you check the other blueprints, all the other blueprints you can see in the top right, parent class actor, parent class actor, actor, and actor. And that's because most blueprints are actors. So that's all we did here. We clicked actor, we open it up. You can see it says actor. So this is what an empty blueprint looks like. And we want to make it a key. So what do we need? When you think about what we need in this blueprint. So at minimum, we need a mesh. We know that for sure, so the player can see it. And then number 2, we need collision, so that when the player actually collides with the object, we can tell the game mode to now say, yes, the player has a key. So let's come back in here. Let's add component. Let's add a mesh. We can say that this is the key mesh. And then click up here, type in just collision, and then you get sphere. You can also do a box if you want, but let's just do a sphere. And I'm going to drag this on top of the scene root, attach it. So I don't want it attached to the mesh. So now let's go find a mesh. So the project used this blue key, but you can use whatever you want. So if I come up to the content folder, I go to filters, static mesh. These are all the different meshes the project has by default, and then you can add any that you want for a key. Let's say we wanted this powerup A to be the key icon, or any of these shards, right? Whatever you want, just pick one. Maybe this flower is the key. I'm just going to go with this flower for fun. So select your mesh, go to your blueprint, select the mesh here, and then click the arrow. It gets added, as you can see. And I'm going to drag this into our world now. You can see that the mesh is really small. Again, if you wanted to, you could go hide the key way out up here if you want. I'm not going to do that. It'll just take too much time. I'm going to go hide the key. Like, let's say I hit it over here, right? I'll put the key right over here. And now that flower is really small, so I'm going to scale it up like that. And now you can see it's much bigger. But then that means I want to make this collision sphere big too. So I can take this and you can either scale it or change the radius here. So if I hold down left click, I can drag. Oh God, I dragged too much. It's probably better to just type. Let's go like 70 or 60. There we go. So now you can see the sphere. And now the next thing to do is click the sphere, scroll down, and overlap all dynamic is fine, but I'm going to set this to overlap only pawn just to be more specific. And then generate overlap events. This needs to be true. If you set this to false, it won't run these overlap events. So set that to true, compile, and then now scroll down on component begin overlap. Let's click the plus, creates an event for us, and we can delete this stuff up here. So other actor, what we're doing, if you recall, is that when the player overlaps the flower, we want to update the key. Now, the developers of this project put the key in the game mode, and I can understand why they would do that. In my opinion, I would actually put it in the player controller. I wouldn't actually put it in the character though, and that's because these characters, they die and respawn and stuff like that. So let's say you had a variable here in the character called myKey. If you updated the key in the character and then you like fell off the cliff and died, then if you look in the game mode, what happens is the character actually gets deleted and then it gets respawned. Pretty sure that's what's going on. And every time the character gets respawned, it's as if it's like a fresh new character. So the key would be set back to false and the player wouldn't have a key anymore. So that's why they're adding it in the game mode in this case. But for me personally, I would make my own player controller and do that in the player controller. And that's because the player controller continues to exist whether the characters are alive or not. So a good example is if a player dies in a multiplayer game, you might delete his character and respawn it, but the player controller continues to exist. And any stats the player has accumulated over its play session, the player controller would hold on to. So that's just a quick little overview of why player controllers are important, but we'll just keep doing what they did here. So we want to come to the game mode and update its key. So that means in myKey, we need to cast to the game mode. So if you remember in the locked door, this is what it looks like. So in order to cast to the game mode, you have to use this get game mode function. So right here, I'm going to right click, get game mode. And then off of this, I can type in cast to, and then these are all the game modes in the project. So in our case, it's called third person game mode. Now connect that. And then now remember in the door locked, we're checking for the key. This is a get have key, but we want to use set have key. So here in the game mode, we can set it to be true. So off of this, let's now go set. I'm just going to type in key, and then this pops up. We now set this to true. So the player now has the key. And then after we set the key, we can now destroy actor, right? We can destroy this key blueprint from the world. We can just delete it. So we update the game mode. We tell the player that yes, he now has the key. Let's now remove this flower from the game. So really that's all it is. It was really just a simple blueprint, just adding the key. Like I said, inventory can be really simple like that. So let's run over here. Let's pick up the flower. It disappears, it deletes. So the player now has the key, it's now true. We come up here. We now press E, and the door slides down. We can now go in. And you can see in the bottom left corner, the HUD has been drawn at 0.3. So what I want to do is I want that to show up really nicely when the player picks up this flower. So in the door locked here, remember here we set the opacity to 0.3. So this is how they did it. They got the HUD reference, then they got T key, and then sets the color and opacity. Kind of confusing, but basically what's going on is the game mode has a variable called HUD. That's the reference to the HUD. That is this. And then what happens is inside of the HUD, there is a T_key variable. Let's go find that. So in the HUD, we have right here, T_key. In the top, if you look here, we have it checked as is variable. Okay, so that means we can access it. And then what they're doing with that variable is they're setting the color and opacity. So this function must exist in the HUD. So let's look for it. So we have T key selected. Where is the color and opacity? Oh, look, right here. It's called color and opacity. So by default, it's set to 0, meaning it's invisible. 1 would mean it's fully visible, as you can see. So what we want to do, knowing this information, we can do this same thing here in our new blueprint before we destroy it, right? Now we can either do what you're actually going to do in the real world, which is you'll just copy this and then paste it. You would do that and then plug that in. But let's say we wanted to do it from scratch. We would just go, we want to get the HUD, right? So the HUD is called HUD ref. So here I would drag off and do get HUD, and we get this get HUD ref. That's the name of the variable. And then we want to get this T_key. So now I need to drag off and type in get T_key. There it is. And then in this variable, these are all the different things we can adjust, right? We could adjust its visibility. We could say whether it's enabled or not. It's transform. We could adjust all this stuff, but we want to do the color and opacity first. So in that case, I'm just going to drag off. I'm going to type in color and opacity, and you get set color and opacity. Plug that in. And by default, it's 1110. So let's click this. Let's go 1110. This is what it is by default. But we want to make it fully visible, right? So I'm going to set the alpha to 1, like that. And then I'm going to hook it up. Now let's play. Okay, I come over to the key. In the lower left corner, you now see it's fully visible. 1.0 on the opacity, and I can open. And then when I open it, it goes down to 0.3. Now let's take this to the next level just to show you. But if you come down here to render transform, we have this transform. Let's see if we can set the scale in the key here. Let's try it. So let's drag off this. Let's go transform. So set render scale. This might be it here. Let's try this. Plug this in. So by default, obviously it's gonna be 1.1, right? But let's do something like 5.5 just to see what happens. All right, let's see what happens. Oh my gosh, it's huge. That's like not even the full thing. That's like half of it. And it still stays big even though I open the door because we never set it back. It's still set to 5.5. So yeah, this is just kind of teaching you how you can access functions and information and stuff like that using these variables in other blueprints and widgets and things like that. So you get like a reference to it. Right here, we're getting a reference to the game mode. And then off of this, we're now getting a reference to the HUD, which is actually set here in the game mode. We make it a variable right there. And then we're getting a reference to that T_key image variable, which is right here. And then we're just messing with these values here. So pretty cool, right? So I'll delete that now. And then we can also play a sound. I forgot about this. Let's play sound either at location or 2D. I'm gonna do at location. And then let's do get actor location. This is the location of the key blueprint, the flower. And then let's play a sound. So we need to go find a sound. So let's go to audio, key. Okay, cool. Let's use that and just plug it in. So now it will play that sound. And then destroy actor. Now there's another blueprint it has here called end goal or something like that. It wants me to place it up here inside of the building. So let's just do that. Okay, end goal. So now what happens in this blueprint? So what's cool here in the outliner, when you add a blueprint to the level, you can click it and then on the right, you can click edit. It'll just open it. So now it's going to do all this stuff when we hit that end goal. So it's going to pause the game. It's going to make a new widget called game completion. Let's see. Okay, so it's going to pop this up on the screen. Okay, that's what this add to viewport does. Whenever you make a widget, you have to run this add to viewport or it won't show. Then we're removing the HUD from the game mode. So we're just removing the old one with the key and stuff like that. And then this begin play. So this runs right away. So we can just go simulate this. See what it looks like. Yeah, so it moves around like that. And that movement is driven by these timelines here. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 different timelines rotating those crystals around. See, set relative location and rotation. 4 different shards here. So a lot of different timeline animation going on. But yeah, that's generally what's happening. So I get the key. And I suck at life. Okay, let's not fall off this time. So I go through the door. And then I hit this shard and then that screen's going to pop up, right? There. So it pauses the game. Says the amount of coins I have. The time it took. Gems, which we didn't really do. Now once you have your game completed, you're going to want to go take your player start here and then, move it back to the beginning here so you could play from start to finish. But then it has one more lesson. There's a lesson 5. So let's go see what that's about. So lesson 5 is more about just doing HUD stuff. And it wants us to add the coin and gem counter, the key icon, and the jump boost icon to the player HUD, the UI. It also wants us to package, but I won't go over that. So what we can do is in the HUD here, remember we have all these elements here which are invisible. Let's set the key by default. We want the opacity to be 0.3 because that's what it was getting set to when we didn't have a key. So, but by default, let's make it 0.3 here. The jump boost, let's also make this one 0.3. Then the coins counter, color and appearance, let's make this a 1. And then gems, we haven't done anything with gems. It's, it's gonna be very similar to coins. I'll let you do that on your own. But let's just do the jump boost. Let's make the jump boost be an opacity of 1.0 when the player collects this jump boost. So let's come into the jump boost here. We cast to the character, we update its jump and all that. Now before the delay, we want to also set this alpha value to 1. So here in BP jump boost, we also want to cast to the game mode. So let's go get game mode and then cast to third person game mode. And then we want to get the HUD, remember the HUD variable, get the HUD reference. And then what's the name of the variable? It's called T_jump boost. So I'm gonna go T_jump boost. We want to get it. And then we want to set the color and opacity. So drag off, I'm gonna type in color and opacity. We want to set it. Now I can hook these up. We want to set it to 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay. And now at the end, after 4 seconds, we want to set it back to 0.3 because it wears off. So after the delay, you want to turn it off. So to do that, just duplicate, plug in, and then drag all the way to the end. And now put it back to 0.3. And now let's put a jump boost. Actually, I got one down here. So just gonna play here. I'm gonna drop down You can see in the lower left, it's like a 0.3, but when I hit it, now it's 1.0. It's fully visible. And now it's worn off and it's back to being 0.3. Now when I collect a coin, the widget doesn't update. The value is still 0. You can see the coins. I'm getting coins, but it's not being updated visually. So the game mode knows we have like 9 coins or however many we've collected, but the HUD has no idea. So now how do we update this value? It says coins:0. So if you go up here on the right, top right, you can click graph. Now we actually have these functions that they've created for us. This one's called update coins. And what happens when we run this event, it's going to get the coin count from the game mode, and it's going to append coins: whatever this number is, the count is, and then set the text here. There are other ways of doing this, but this is how they do it, so we'll just do that. And now you might be wondering, like, where did this update coins event come from? Like, how did they make it? We haven't really seen any events like this. The only other one we've seen really is in the game mode here. There's this respawn and this on destroyed. The only other events we've seen have been the begin overlap and the end overlap. We haven't really seen any other events. So what are these? Where are these coming from? So these are called custom events. You can make your own events. You can make your own functions up here, right? You can click this plus function and make your own functions. So in your development, you're going to use a lot of custom events and functions. But let's say we wanted to make our own event. You can right click, start typing custom, and you'll get this add custom event. So you click that, and then you could say, add coins to UI. This is usually how I word my custom events. Update coins isn't specific enough for me. So I usually make it more specific like this. So I'm actually going to delete that event. And we'll now use this new one I did. And this is now a custom event that we can call from any class that's referencing this HUD. So if I go to the third person game mode, for example, here, like here's just a reference to the HUD. I could drag this off now and type in add coins. And now I can, call this function now here. So if I double click this, it just goes straight to the function and it will run this event. So that's the beauty about making your own events and functions. And there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to custom events, especially when it comes to multiplayer games, because you can set them to run on server or run on the owning client only. I don't want to get into depth about that at all in this video, but if you do want to learn about multiplayer, all of my courses are designed for multiplayer. I actually only work in multiplayer. I don't really make single player games. I think you should always just build your games to be multiplayer compatible, because at the end of the day, when it comes to Unreal Engine, all your games are running on the server. Even if it's a single player game, you're technically the server. The player is the host. The single player is the listen server, as they call it right here. And that's just how Unreal Engine is designed, because it comes from a FPS background. That's like, Unreal Engine's always been designed for FPS games from the beginning. And it's kind of more evolved towards being an all-around engine for all sorts of different types of games. But it originally started as an engine for like Unreal Tournament and multiplayer games and things like that. So it's built for multiplayer from the ground up. So I like to design all my functionality and stuff in Unreal Engine with multiplayer in mind. So maybe another day I'll do a beginner's tutorial on multiplayer, but for now, that'll come another day. But yeah, that's your little mini introduction to custom events here. So now how do we add these coins to the UI, right? So the player runs over these coins. These coins are getting added to the game mode. Like I said, it's being added under the hood, but visually in the HUD, this amount isn't getting updated. So we want to update this amount here. And if you look here, this is called coins counter. And up here, we have this is variable checked. It's true. Now, by default, if you do add a text to your widget, so I just added a new text. It's up here. by default, your text blocks aren't going to be variables. If you want to change the numbers of them and change the text, things like that, you have to make them variables. So that's what's happened here. They've made this coins text a variable. And then that gives you access to it here on the left. And you can now do stuff with it. And so in this case, what we're doing is after we get the number of coins that the player has, we're then appending coins, and then after it, whatever the number is, whatever the amount is, and then that's what we're doing here with this set text. So this set text, this is a function, and it updates the text of whatever this value is here. So if you look on the right, it says text right here. It's just updating this. So if I actually disconnected that and typed in like Unity is cringe or something, when I call this function, this text will now say Unity is cringe, which it is. So I'm just going to plug this back in, but Unity is cringe. But now we want to actually call this event when we pick up a coin. So here we have the third person game mode. This is in the coin. We update the coin amount. Let's now update the visuals. So let's get this HUD reference here. It's going to drag off, do get HUD reference. And then now in the HUD, we can call this event, this add coins to UI. So drag off, add coins to UI, there it is. And then we just hook it up. And so now every time we pick up a coin, it's going to run this event and it will update. Okay, so I'm just going to click a coin, it says +1. You can see it updating. Wow, we're such good gamers. Okay guys, so that is going to do it for the video. This is the second long beginners tutorial that I've done, and I wanted to make a new one using this project and with the latest version 4.26. So if you're new to Unreal Engine and you went all the way to this point, you know, congratulate yourself. You've actually learned a lot in such a short amount of time. I've also got 3 courses that will take your skills to the next level. You can check the link out in the description. But for now, I would suggest expanding this game. You know, add more coins, add more islands, add more checkpoints, build on it, make it larger, maybe add your own character eventually. Just things like that. There's lots of things you can build off of this and really make a legit fun game, okay? So thanks for watching, guys. Go ahead and subscribe if you're new here, and I will catch you next time.